It's a long journey. It's a long journey. It's a long journey, but I think you'll get there.
This is part of the deprogramming, is it?
That was one of the most inauthentic things I have seen Gavin Newsom do.
Wow.
Well, California Governor Gavin Newsom has launched a new podcast. It appears that the average Democratic voter is not buying it. Case in point, hosts on The View, who recently commented on an episode of Gavin Newsom's podcast when he had on his guest, Steve Bannon, of all people, right-wing strategist, Trump ally, and offered very little pushback in the discussion. So I'm going to break down here what is really going on with Gavin Newsom and offer you as well a different perspective of what politicians right now can be doing to help organize and fight against Donald Trump, with at least 2 examples of that. And also get to the View clip as well, which I think is the reason I'm showing this. I find it encouraging to see that regular Democratic voters are waking up to the amount of bullshitters that are within the Democratic Party. And to see Gavin Newsom take this heat already is really good to see, because we all know he's going to be a front runner in the next election. At least he's going to attempt to be a front runner. And it's important to build this up now to understand how full of crap Gavin Newsom is. So first, I'm not going to play this clip yet because it's going to be in the View clip, but he offered no pushback on Trump's big lie, the idea that Trump won the election. Gavin Newsom did not push back on Bannon on that at all. Recently, he had on Charlie Kirk as well, another right-wing lunatic propagandist. Watch this interaction. Again, keeping in mind, this is supposed to be a way, this platform is supposed to be a way for Gavin Newsom to push back on these ideas and offer the truth. Watch this.
Last night, trying to put my son to bed, he's like, no, Dad, what time? What time's Charlie going to be here? What time? And I'm like, dude, you're in school tomorrow. He's 13. He's like, no. This morning, wakes up at 6 something. He's like, I'm coming. I'm like, he literally would not leave the house.
Did you let him take off school?
No, he did. Of course not. He's not here for a good reason. But the point is
you canceled school for like 2 years. One day.
The point is the point, which is you are making a damn dent.
Thank you. I'm kidding.
When you go to these college campuses, I love watching your TikTok, which is next level. And clearly, that's expressed by my 13-year-old son.
I want to meet this guy.
Yeah, I actually.
He's coming to a Turning Point event this summer, Tampa, Florida, Student Action Summit.
I actually am by the way, if you
should be concerned.
But actually, let me say, here is why I'm concerned, because you have expressed that I should be concerned as a Democrat, that we're getting clobbered.
Okay. Yes.
That you've figured something out.
It's not me. The president first deserves the credit.
But why? No, hold on. You were at this before Trump was Trump.
I know, but
he was a Democrat back in 2011 and 12.
The president deserves huge credit.
Okay, so before I get to the Gavin Newsom portion of this, because it is just so embarrassing, the point that Charlie Kirk makes there, that, the president deserves huge credit for the success of Charlie Kirk and TPUSA, he's right. He's not lying. It is, in fact, the president's son, Don Jr., and his girlfriend at the time, Kimberly Guilfoyle, a leading Republican fundraiser that helped to make TPUSA and Charlie Kirk relevant. So this is a quote from a veteran Republican operative. I would often see Kirk and Don Jr. hanging out at the Trump Hotel restaurant in D.C. he had, where big donors and lobbyists were ubiquitous during Trump's presidency. So there's donors that are listed here, like Foster Freeze, a multimillionaire, the Bradley Foundation, Donors Trust. This is how Republican propaganda takes hold. There is so much outside money poured into it from billionaires, massive corporations, and the whole point of it is to distract people from what actually matters, like the high cost of living, their own low wages, the lack of agency they have in their lives in the workplace, the fact that healthcare is not guaranteed to them, the fact that they don't have childcare, on and on and on and on. These issues are pushed to the side, and new narratives are created around things like DEI or trans athletes that work to distract people from the actual issues in their own lives. And it's just wild that Gavin Newsom, saw this guy and thought, hey, I got to have him on the podcast. One of the first guests. Charlie Kirk, quote, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Gavin Newsom saw this and I was like, I got to have this guy on and then talk about how much my son loves him. So before I get to the View clip, Bloomberg writes here, quote, Gavin Newsom's podcast guests aren't stupid, but strategic, saying the California governor may be creating some space between himself and the Democratic Party. And I agree with Bloomberg. This is intentional. These aren't choices that are made by accident. He is trying to move further right. The way Gavin Newsom is viewing this is that he sees the world as, oh, the right wing views him as this far left governor of California, which is not the case at all. I'll get to a few examples in a second here. But that's how the right wing world views him, as, you know, the California governor. So he must be crazy far left. So he is trying to change his image in the eyes of those individuals who are never going to vote for him, regardless of what he is, trying to change his image to be more open to the right wing. This is a strategic move ahead of an attempted run next time for president. But the realities of Gavin Newsom are a lot more clear. So he has vetoed endless bills that would actually have helped people. Examples here, he vetoed a number of pro-employee / pro-union bills. So I'll link to this below the video. This is from California labor and employment law. They go through all the details there. He also recently blocked a landmark AI safety bill. So again, siding with big business, siding with Silicon Valley against what actually matters. And another example, he is part of the effort, or was part of the effort, to kill the idea of single payer in California. And that was after he claimed that he was for single payer. And of course, when it actually came down to fighting for it, he worked against it. So let me get to The View now. Their comments on his episode with Steve Bannon.
This is part of the process to unwind you from being a globalist to make you a populist nationalist. It's
Well,
a long journey. It's a long journey. It's a long journey, but I think you'll get there.
This is part of the deprogramming, is it?
I think that's a lesson that we learned after President Trump. And look, you know, we disagree on this, but President Trump won the 2020 election. It was really Bernie Sanders and Pocahontas that was going to be the
Senator Warren.
Elizabeth Warren is going to be Pocahontas, we call it.
I don't think Governor Newsom hit the right tone on this. I'm all for sitting down with people. I say over and over at this table, you got to have the conversations, even with the difficult people. But there was no pushback on some things when we talked about, you know, he said, we disagree on who won the election. Factually, that was a moment where you say, no, there's been zero proof.
This is a poor strategy for Gavin Newsom. I actually did think that he was one of the leaders that would come out in terms of 2028. I remember watching his annual State of the Union address in California, and he criticized Republicans, and he promoted California as an antidote to the poisonous populism of the right. Now he has a Steve Bannon on the show who's saying, you know, you're going to get to populism. There's a long road. He gives zero pushback there. He gives zero pushback, as Sarah pointed out, to really what is a slur against Senator Warren, a sitting senator. He gives a platform and normalizes, in my view, an election denier and someone who is the person who is behind Project 2025. And I believe that, you know, if you are going to be a public servant, you better be unapologetically authentic, because voters can sniff out inauthenticity in a second. And I thought that was one of the most inauthentic things I have seen Gavin Newsom do.
Wow.
I'm terribly,
so you don't believe in the let them hang themselves theory?
No, I'm terribly disappointed. I think you meet energy with energy. And what he did was he showed his pretty white teeth and his cute face and did nothing other than that. And I think it's despicable.
I gotta say, this is very encouraging to see what I would consider largely, you know, the mainstream Democratic viewership of The View, to see who Gavin Newsom really is being presented to them. They are seeing through the facade. This is who Gavin Newsom has always been. It's been, you know, nice teeth and a pretty face. It's very little else behind that mask, except for, you know, the massive defense of corporations and pushing down the working class. But that has been something that Gavin Newsom has been able to hide because of how he has always presented himself and how he has, you know, debate with, you know, Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, and he pointed at him on the tarmac and was angry with him. Like, he has been able to present himself as somebody who has been a fighter while not actually fighting for working class people. And people are seeing through it, and this is going to continue. Voters generally, I think, Democratic voters I'm speaking on here, are waking up to how little the Democratic Party, in particular Democratic Party leadership, is doing right now in the face of everything that Trump and Elon Musk are doing, they're over it. They're over these useless clowns. And they are gravitating towards people like Tim Walz, who we'll get to in a bit, and Bernie Sanders, who is holding these town halls and actually interacting with people one-on-one. So check out this clip. This is from Altoona, Wisconsin, when Bernie was there speaking. This is from March 10th, speaking with voters there.
Raise your hand. What is it like living paycheck to paycheck? Who wants to? All right, let me get some hands back there. Be loud. We got a hand there. Okay, ma'am. Stressful. Stay on that issue, sir.
You're not sure if you're going to be able to keep the heat on.
You're not sure if you're going to be able to keep the heat on. Yes, ma'am. Trying to find a way to plan a meal until your next paycheck comes. Ma'am? Forget about buying shoes and clothes for your kids. Ma'am? Skipping doctor's visits. Okay, I see a hand back there, sir. Yeah. Fear that your world is going to fall apart, sir.
Am I getting glasses or am I getting it for my kid?
Am I getting glasses or can I get them for my kids? Sir. Can't plan for the future. Hand back there, sir.
Psychological warfare.
Okay, psychological warfare. Yes.
You make impossible decisions for your family.
You make impossible decisions for your family, sir.
General insecurity.
General insecurity. Okay, I think you got it. So let me just tell you something. If we were a poor country, I would come before you and give you a very different speech. I'd say, hey, look, I'm sorry, we're poor. We can't afford decent education, can't afford decent health care. I want you never to forget, we are the richest country in the history of the world. There is no excuse for people dying young because of that stress.
So while Gavin Newsom is meeting with far-right propagandists funded by billionaires, Bernie Sanders is meeting with real people and asking them what they're going through. It is the antithesis of what Gavin Newsom is doing. Another great example of somebody that is actually doing something who is a politician is Tim Walz, who has said in a recent interview they're going to expect universal health care. Walz says voters will demand more of Democrats. So he understands, like there's been a lot of recent reporting that's been very just frustrating to read because I knew it was happening while it was happening, but about how the Harris campaign essentially held down Tim Walz, didn't allow him to be himself and why he was so popular in Minnesota, and that ultimately hurt their campaign because he wasn't able to be himself. But here he is free of those chains, back to what made him popular, and that is meeting the needs of people. And look, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but if this is a name that pops up in 4 years, I think it's one that would be worth paying attention to. Now, I want to get to a clip from a recent interview he did on Chris Hayes discussing something that he is doing.
A few Democrats, and I think you're one of them, have basically said, look, we'll do it. If you've got an area of this country that you want to talk to someone and your own Republican rep won't talk to you, I'll go do it. Is that still an open offer from you?
Yeah, I'm going Friday, I think. I'm headed to Iowa. I'm going to go do it. I've been asked by these folks if it works. I'm going to go use the platform that I have and hand them the megaphone to talk about this. I wouldn't do those town halls if I were them either, because they have to defend cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, hurting their local public school, fighting a trade war with Canada, just the nonsense and defending President Musk.
So I think this is brilliant. While Republicans are being told by Republican leadership to not hold in-person town halls, people like Tim Walz are coming in to fill that gap. This is another fantastic way of how to actually communicate with voters and not, pull a Gavin Newsom, start a podcast, and bring on a bunch of right-wing clowns. So that's a good governor. They do exist. But let's see if this awakening from the normie Democratic voter continues.